Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. Weber Wenzel Africa mining head Peter Leon says South Africa should consider signing the International Labour Organization's Convention 169, which affects mining communities. Mining Weekly editor Martin Creamer tells us more. Welcome, Martin.
Thanks, Shannon.
Can you tell us what the ILO's Convention 169 is and why it would be beneficial for South Africa to ratify it?
Yeah, it's a legally binding international instrument that you give a country 1 year to implement, and it's been ratified by several countries. I don't know which countries there are, but I believe there are about 20. And it's the ILO stands for International Labour Organization, so it's around social justice issues, but applied to mining communities. And so Peter Leon is saying, this is the world benchmark, this is the global best practice. Why not go towards that? Because the whole issue of mining communities is becoming very difficult to manage, and you might as well go for the world benchmark. I mean, we've already had our, South Africa's Constitutional Court deal with one case where a mining company got a prospecting right, but when the community complained through the courts and eventually got to the Constitutional Court decided, look, you never really consulted properly with these this community, so therefore, we're taking your prospecting right away. And this just increases the risk. So they might as well do it correctly from the start. And the three big things about it, from what I can see, is that the community has got to give consent, and it's got to be free consent. It's got to be prior consent before you start, and it's got to be informed consent. That's going to be quite a job for these companies, but I think it's worth doing, because then at least you feel you've fulfilled all the requirements.
On that note, can you elaborate the facilitation process that Coal of Africa used to involve mining communities with mining companies?
It's incredible, what the companies are doing behind the scenes. And this is Coal of Africa, and it's with the coal project that it had in Limpopo called Mikado. And the closer it got to the communities, and the more that it consulted with the communities, the more they realized that this also divides the communities, because they have different viewpoints within the community. So how do you find out whether you're talking to the legitimate viewpoint or the legitimate leaders? And it's incredible, but they went into a whole election process, and they got independent observers to declare this free and fair. So it's like an election within a country, and they then arrived at the legitimate leadership. But even when you do that, the people who are against it still remain against it. So you've got to be able to deal with that as well. It's almost like having an opposition, and so it's pretty tricky. But it was innovative, and it actually, I think, could set a sort of a model for others to follow.
Now, Water Stewardship Council of South Africa trustee Dr. Anthony Turton, meanwhile, says mine closure planning and funding should be implemented at the inception of a new mine. Yeah,
well, you can see that the issue of a mining license, as we've been used to in South Africa, you get this mining license, that's your license to operate. It's fast moving beyond that, where you can see that the social license is now becoming top of the pops, and so that's why I think a lot of people are calling for a new social compact. He's even saying now that you must rethink your fundamental business case when you're mining. You must start planning your closure from day one, and you must also fund that closure with milestones so people can see that you're doing it, and you're replenishing your funding for this mine closure as you go. So mining is becoming a very difficult game, in that there are so many people watching what you're doing, so many people having a say. It's not going to be easy. All those affected parties are going to be able to keep an eye on you and see that you are spending the money in the right way. And you can see a lot of others are calling for greater transparency, like even Peter Leon last year called for the country to back this idea of the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, ET, For some reason, we haven't signed that, which many people are wondering why we haven't done it, because it was actually announced here in 2002. I'm sure they thought we'd be the first ones to go for this. You know, a lot of African countries have taken it up, and places like Norway have taken it up. So you wonder why we haven't. But that will also throw a lot more light on the financial side of mining, you know, the revenues being made, what they're doing with the money. And again, this whole openness is being called for, and it's around being able to make sure that there is a social element all the time, that the people are being looked after. And even, you know, with the structures of companies these days, they're saying, you know, perhaps mining companies should not have the single tier of an executive in one tier. They're also calling for like a two-tier structure, as they have in Germany, where your top tier is supervisory. It doesn't do the day-to-day work, but the executive is in the second tier. But the supervisory tier, if you take the German example, can have like a 50% labor element to it. So there's a worker co-determination, again, to keep an eye on the social side of things. So it's very interesting, these developments coming through right here in South Africa.
Luckily, the mining companies are very adaptive.
They are very adaptive. I think you've got to adapt or die in this situation. And I think they are wise enough to see that, look, this is a big industry. They can cope with a lot of the demands, because I think in the long term they realize that the metals and minerals are going to be so urgently needed by the world that everyone can win. You know, when you just take your cell phone, I mean, there's just so many metals and minerals in there. If we want an iPhone, we've got to have mining. If we want a car, we've got to have mining. You know, if we want a metal table, we've got to have mining. It's just such an integral part of the modern world that they might as well do it properly, because the demand is going to build up. There's this huge urbanization all around the world. People are moving to cities. And when they're moving to cities, they want the washing machine, they want the car, you know, they want all the communication. You need so much copper for it, and you need so much iron ore for it, and so much steel, and all the other elements that go with it. Even if you go for wind energy, you know, you need so much cement, and of course cement needs the limestone mine. So there's no place to hide. You know, mining is there, it's part of the modern fabric. And I think it's coming very much into the 21st century, as you can see, with all these new thoughts around particularly the social compact.
Thank you very much, Martin.
It's a great pleasure, Shannon.
That's the show for today. Join us again next time for more news and insight into what's happening in the mining world.